Hi, my name is Christine Bolt. I'm a third year student studying history at CU Boulder. Today we will be discussing Mary, Queen of Scots, the factors that contributed to her eventual unpopular position as Queen of Scotland, as well as the series of plots that contributed to her forced abdication as Queen, or that otherwise would seek to place her as ruling Queen of England. To give an overview of Mary, Queen of Scots, Mary was born in 1542 as the only legitimate daughter of James V of Scotland and his French wife, Marie de Guise. Marie de Guise's family was influential in Mary's adoption of France as her cultural home, but we will discuss this more in detail later. Mary inherited the throne when she was 6 days old. Her royal lineage gave her a distinct claim to multiple European thrones. Largely remembered for the tragedy and misfortune she experienced throughout her life, Mary was arguably used as a pawn by those around her to achieve influence and power. Nonetheless, as queen, she sought to be a neutral, fair-minded ruler amidst a divided Scotland, but various factors culminated in her alienation from her people. The misfortunate life of Mary, Queen of Scots, is often attributed to her marriages, despite her being a queen in her own right. Mary was arguably tokenized by others in order to gain more power, assert alliances, etc. Many historians maintain differing opinions on her capabilities as Queen of Scotland. Various biographers will take the route of pity and tragedy, while others presenting more harsher and critical accounts of her life. Mary's alienation and unfamiliarity with her native country played a part in her increasingly becoming out of touch and out of favor as Scotland's monarch. Due to strife within Scotland and King Henry VIII's vision of French and Scottish conquests around the time of her birth, Mary's French mother, Marie de Guise, of the prominent influential House of Guise, sought to renew Scotland's centuries-old alliance with France, resulting in the marriage of Mary, Queen of Scots, and the Dauphin of France, Francis II. Mary, Queen of Scots, left Scotland for France at the age of 5. With her formative years and education left in the hands of her Valois in-laws, she was raised in a French manner, accustomed to the lavishness and opulence of French court. For example, Mary adopted the French spelling of her surname. Additionally, all throughout her life, she was known to prefer speaking in French whenever possible. Referring back to the notion that Mary was an instrument to achieve power and influence and move up the ranks, these three figures ultimately instilled a sense of righteous destiny in the young queen. In Queen of Scots, The True Life of Mary Stuart, author and Tudor historian states that the glamour and luxury of French court that Mary had become so accustomed to reinforced one driving idea in her mind. As well as being Queen of Scotland and the next Queen of France, she must also aspire to be a future Queen of England. Mary's father-in-law, Henry II of France, also saw her as an asset to further his own dynastic plans of asserting power beyond the borders of France. For context, England's current ruler, Elizabeth I, and Mary, Queen of Scots, were cousins as a result of Henry VIII's sister's marriage to James IV of Scotland, Mary's grandfather. With a clear ancestral line to the Tudor dynasty and her adherence to Catholicism, many European powers and regions of the British Isles believed Mary had a stronger claim to England's crown. Compared to Elizabeth, Henry is Protestant and formally once declared a bastard daughter. Mary's uncles, Francis, Duke of Guise, and Charles, Cardinal of Lorraine, who also happened to be the leading proponents that arranged Mary's marriage to the Dauphin, saw their niece as the true heir to the English throne, given the aforementioned terms in which Elizabeth I was declared the monarch. According to Guy, the ultra-Catholic House of Guise swiftly proclaimed their niece to be Queen of England, Scotland, and Ireland upon Elizabeth's coronation. With the untimely death of Mary's husband, Francis I, Mary, seeing little hope for a future in France, chose to depart for Scotland, where she was still a crowned queen in her own right. In Mary's absence, Scotland had been experiencing monumental change. Although Protestantism's ascendancy in Scotland was primarily a result of religious dissatisfaction, which was part of a broader departure from the Catholic Church that occurred throughout Europe, the Scottish Reformation quickly took a political route, and additionally, the Scottish political system was conventionally different than in nations such as England or France. Support and backing from Scottish clans was crucial in retaining the crown supremacy. During Mary's residency in France, prominent Scottish lords saw the vacant throne as a means to rule their Scotland as they saw fit, and act without fear of repercussions, as many of them were already adamantly against Scotland's relatively centralized government. Protestant minister John Knox is typically viewed as the primary leader behind the Scottish Reformation. He advocated for the establishment of a Reformed church for Scotland. However, this culminated in criticism and an outright assault on the character of their Catholic sovereign Mary, Queen of Scots, and which consequently shifted Scotland's religious upheaval to be more intrinsically intertwined with nation's politics. Furthermore, the influx of prominent Scottish lords converting to the Protestant faith, combined with Catholic Mary's return in 1561, the young queen found herself positioned on the throne with very little acting authority. Despite her Scottish ancestry, Mary's true cultural heritage was firmly rooted in France. Politically speaking, those around her typically did as they pleased. They believed Mary's religious and cultural differences made her unfit to rule Scotland, and they sought to minimize and shatter any sense of control that Mary had over the nation. For instance, in 1566, which started almost a domino effect in her reign, this was the start of it. Just about 5 years after her return to Scotland, a band of lords from Scottish Parliament entered her chambers late one night and carried out the murder of David Rizzio, Mary's private secretary. Led by Lord Ruthven and fueled by Mary's second husband, Henry Stuart, also known as Lord Darnley, who was jealous of the Queen's friendship with Rizzio, and amid various rumors such as Rizzio being the actual father of Mary's son, with whom she was currently pregnant with, Rizzio being a papal spy. Finally, amid conjectures that Rizzio had once been Lord Darnley's lover, which had been proven to be the most plausible of these three I just listed. Overall, the lords orchestrated this as a means of showing their queen that they had little command over her people, as well as to supplant Darnley's position in court, as they saw who they saw as an annoying individual, for lack of a better term, a better explanation. Ultimately, they remained from this unscathed. They received little to no punishment, and they were pardoned for their actions. As previously mentioned, however, Darnley was neither well liked by Scottish court, relatively, nor by his wife. He was demanding, and in modern terms, we would call him an adulterer, an alcoholic. And ultimately, in the aftermath of Rizzio's murder, he and Mary, Queen of Scots, were living separately. After 5 months after Rizzio's death, Lord Darnley, in 1567, in February, he was murdered. Suspicions surrounding the manner in which he was killed implicated Queen Mary and James Hepburn, 4th Earl of Bothwell, who months later would abduct her and sexually assault her in order to coerce her into marriage. Bothwell was eventually acquitted of having orchestrated Darnley's murder, but Scottish public opinion was generally unsettled by the notion that their queen might just marry the man who was more than likely responsible for her husband's death. Not long after, in July 1567, Scottish lords decisively sought to depose Mary as their queen, forcing her to abdicate in favor of her infant son, James VI, and appointing James the Stewart, the first Earl of Moray, who also happened to be Mary's illegitimate half-brother, regent of Scotland for his nephew and Mary's son. Finally, as a result, Mary, who became widely unpopular in Scotland, was forced to flee to England for her safety, and during this period, she would be embroiled in various plots in order to instate herself or others to instate her as Queen of England. For instance, the Rodolphi plot of 1571, the Throckmorton plot of 1583, and the Parry plot that occurred in 1585, and finally the Babington plot in which she would be led to her demise and executed by Elizabeth I in 1586. All of these attempts were by Catholic sympathizers of Mary of varying degrees to install her as Queen of England. She has also had varying levels of participation and roles in each of these plots. However, ultimately, her implication in the Babington plot, as I mentioned, solidified her execution. The belief that was instilled in her by her family in her youth, that she was destined to be queen, forget, never mind which nation, remained with her all throughout her life. In a way, Mary saw Scotland as nothing more than a royal birthright, if I might add, something to fall back on when there were no other options. Whereas France and England represented glory and grandeur and luxury.